Welcome to Go Kaiju Show, where we have a healthy obsession with kaiju. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host,
Jason, and welcome to our 200th episode.
Oh, shit. You didn't even tell me that before we started. And we spent the last half hour talking before coming on here.
Yeah, we got a little bit too distracted with some of the talk that we had.
Yeah, we were giving each other health advice as far as like cooking oils and stuff.
But yeah, after 14 years of doing this podcast, we finally made it to episode 200.
We technically have more if you count commentaries and any other side episodes we've done. But then, yeah, we would have gotten to this sooner had we not take long breaks, a year and a half hiatus, and
doing episodes every other 2 weeks, like we're doing right now.
Yeah. So, hey, you know what? We got there.
Yes.
Give us money, please. We have a milestone.
But anyways, it's not going to be too over the top or anything like some of these other podcasts or live shows that they usually do.
Yeah. Like, they make such a big deal out of it. Yeah, they may get there in like 6 months. Took us 14 years. Let's see anyone else try that.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a 1,000th episode, it may be a little bit different, but I mean, 200.
I think when you do 100, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I think the next milestone should be 500. And then after that, 1,000.
Yeah, I know. It's been so many years since we've last done episode 100. I think it was 10 years ago, but I don't necessarily. I can't remember what we done with that one, but
I don't either.
Yeah,
you know what we should
just
do?
a lot just in memory.
You know what we should do is make it our goal that we quit this podcast when we hit episode 1,000.
Oh,
and episode 1,000 is looking over our career and then saying goodbye to the world.
No way. There's no way we're going to get to.
No, we seriously could. No, here's one way that can easily help us. If we start counting those commentaries and any of those like little side episodes.
But then all these episodes are going to be screwed up.
It doesn't matter. We can just do the recount from there. Like, okay, starting episode 200 and then start with the commentary. Even if that was 15 years ago, whatever. And make that as 201.
Yeah, I'm not gonna deal with all that because some of that, like the images and all that stuff that we have, is already a done deal. So.
Lazy I mean, he can't take the time to spend an additional several hundred hours of his life to recreate graphics.
Dude, I'm the one that's doing all the stuff.
I know.
You literally have no idea what.
No, I mean, I have an idea, but I'm giving you garbage. I'm giving you garbage.
But anyways, we're getting off topic once again here.
By the way, Jason, what cooking oils again are you?
Do you want me to come over there and beat the living shit out? Yeah.
It's going to take you about 12 hours to get here. But
yes, I know. I'll make the effort.
I could see you like thinking about it and then not doing it. But anyways, what we are doing now, we are continuing our sort of Netflix animated features. And we are concluding that section with the Ultraman anime trilogy. It was a series of 13 episodes apiece, and it first debuted in 2019. And what we are doing is today's episode is going to be devoted to season 1. A couple weeks from now, it'll be season 2. And then a couple weeks after that, it'll be season 3. And then an overall look at this series as a whole.
Yeah. So I'm going to correct you. Each season isn't 13 episodes each.
Oh, it's
season
not?
2 has 6 and third and last season has 12.
I wonder, did season 2 come out during like the early days of COVID? Is that right?
It came out in 2022, so
COVID could have interfered.
A few years after first season, and then season 3 came out a year after.
That's incredible, though. It came out 3 years now. Grant again, COVID, like COVID probably at least postponed it. COVID could have even messed with them in terms of like getting people together to animate and like write and all that stuff too. Probably. Wow. Okay. So actually, now that we know that, instead of doing 3 podcasts on the series, do we want to do 2 podcasts where we cover season 2, 3, and then the whole thing? Since we found out that season 2 is much shorter.
Why don't we talk about it once we get done with this episode?
Okay. I just assumed they were all. Sorry, folks. This is why you come listen to us. You listen to Amateur Hour here. We know who we are.
You should have done your freaking research.
I've always said on this podcast, look, if you're looking for like high quality research, occasionally we do that, but not very often. But if you're looking for high quality research, this is not the podcast. But if you're looking for fun, this is the podcast to come to. Mm-hmm. So, like I was telling Jason right before we came on, I'm a little unsure of how to go about discussing season 1 here because it's not the full story. And even though in some ways it has its own self-contained story that has a conclusion, but not all the threads of the overarching story have their threads tied. So, I'm a little hesitant to kind of approach certain things with finality until we get through the whole thing. But at the same time, I will overall judge it as just a season to the best of my ability. And hopefully this will be a fruitful discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as season, well, before we move on, I just want to say, if you see a subscribe button down below or above us, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button. And if you're listening to us on your favorite audio podcast, make sure to subscribe to us and give us a rating.
All right. So let's get into the anime Ultraman season 1. I noticed throughout watching all 13 episodes, there was never really a title card sequence. Mm-hmm. They just delved right into the story. And because
they think it's like the title cards are just a waste of time. Let's just get right into it.
It could be. They might have thought that. We don't have the extra $100 to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to spend it over here instead. But anyway, this is mainly a continuation of the original Ultraman TV series. And arguably, too, even a continuation of like Ultra 7, maybe even Ultraman Ace to some extent, too, although that's maybe debatable considering one of the characters here in this series.
I would just say it's more or less a direct sequel to the original 1966 Ultraman. And I would, with way things are, I don't think they don't blend in like some of the other Ultramans or shows or any of that sort, but they just sort of include them with this direct sequel with Dan Moriboshi and some of the other Ultraman characters. I know I haven't seen Ace and all that, but I'm assuming it's the same name for the character in that particular series and such.
Yeah. And so, again, I should know better because we've done a lot of reviews, even in recent episodes. I'm not quite sure how to go about starting this. How
about the kind of the
self-contained
story for this first season?
Okay.
Where they were trying to investigate who blew up this plane that we encounter in the first episode and who's behind it and everything.
Well, even that kind of gets dropped in large chunks of this first season because we get these side stories as far as Reina Sayama, who is a secondary character. She is a very popular Japanese pop artist. in which our main character, Shinjiro, is infatuated with, and tries to hit on her and that sort of thing periodically over the course of the 13 episodes.
And it's got that cliche type of teenager storyline as far as trying to find himself or herself and going on this journey of being hesitant on making decisions until kind of towards the finale where they know who they are.
Yeah, and so let me do the best I can to sort of give a synopsis of kind of the stories that are going on throughout these 13 episodes. And it's pretty dense. These 13 episodes are very dense with a lot of characters, character threads, and stories and what have you. So, Shinjiro is the son of Hayata, the original Ultraman. And he grows up, he's, probably 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there. And what ends up happening is they find out that the Science Patrol actually did not. Let me restart that. The episode starts out with the Science Patrol supposedly having been disbanded for about a decade, but what ends up happening is that Ide, and I think that's the silly character, right, from the original Ultraman series,
Ide or Ito,
which. He's actually pretty serious in this.
That's what I was going to say too. Is with all the quirkiness, the guy who portrays as Ide or Ito, however you go about it, from the original Ultraman to this one, where it's a direct sequel, where for whatever reason he's now a really serious guy in a way.
He's not uber serious, but he's more serious than he was in the original show.
It sort of throws you off in a way because the Ide or Ito character that from the original Ultraman TV show, where he's kind of that goofy guy that kind of elevates some of the seriousness that happens from time to time in that TV show to and then transition into this. It kind of throws you off a little bit.
Let me just say, this whole series, by and large, if it's a continuation of the original Ultraman, a lot of things here throw you for a loop, considering what they do here. Yeah. But Ide reveals to Hayata that really the Science Patrol never totally disbanded, that the old Science Patrol building is now a museum. However, in the bowels of the building, they have kept the Science Patrol going. And in many ways, it's not only sort of run by Ide, but it's also headed by an alien, a Zetonian alien named Edo, who's kind of a Cyclops-looking alien with, for lack of a better explanation, an elf type top for a head. And so they realize that the reason why they keep this going is not only because of other threats, but because of Hayata has Ultraman blood running through his veins and also his son. And so what ends up happening is that they eventually recruit Shinjiro to be the new Ultraman. Now, Shinjiro and eventually Moroboshi, which if you're not familiar with Ultra 7, you're not going to realize that Moroboshi is Ultra 7.
I just want to say one thing about Dan Moroboshi. Like I said, it's been many years since I've last talked about the Ultraman anime TV show that I discussed many years ago on our podcast episode. I've never realized how much of a stick-up a-hole that he is in this show.
You need one of those characters, I guess.
Yeah.
But he eventually becomes Ultra 7. And Moroboshi's sort of like a mentor of sorts, even though he doesn't want to be a mentor to Shinjiro. But then they end up making Shinjiro the next Ultraman. And these new Ultraman are basically Iron Man. Let's face it. Mm-hmm. The Subaraya and Netflix are like, hey, at this moment in time, Avengers Endgame is in theaters. The Marvel movies have always been popular. We're going to make our Ultraman stuff for this series like Iron Man suits. So that's a little annoying, but
you can maybe say a little bit of that, even though the anime is based off of the manga that's been around since 2011. So it's been at least a few years since the original Ultraman, probably not Ultraman, Iron Man came out, and possibly Iron Man 2.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's got that anime or manga flair to those suits.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is they're trying to investigate this weird plane crash that happened a number of years earlier. And this weird looking Ultraman type of character shows up. And then that same Ultraman character shows up and kind of stalks Shinjiro. They eventually get into a tussle with Hayata in like a soccer facility in Tokyo. And I thought this Ultraman character, who we find out is actually Bemular. They named themselves Bemular, the first villain. I thought they killed Hayata, but no, they didn't kill Hayata. Shinjiro comes in, kind of fights off Bemular a little bit, then Bemular eventually retreats. And then Hayata really for the rest of the series is almost non-existent after this. And then they kind of go into this whole thing where Shinjiro is occasionally battling some monsters, but then learning a little bit from Moroboshi. Moroboshi is very irritated by Shinjiro because he thinks Shinjiro should know a little bit more about how special he is and really understand how important his role is in being an Ultraman. And Moroboshi kind of teaches him, like, there's a part in Tokyo where there's all these aliens, but most of them use human disguises, technology to make themselves look human. There's an informant in this area that they use to try to track down any aliens that may end up kind of going off grid, so to speak, that may be causing trouble. But then there's been this string of murders that they aren't quite sure what happens. For what the motive is for all those. So then they end up sort of investigating that, realizing that an alien more than likely is involved here. And then they do some investigation, and then they realize that the person who is committing these murders is a Reina Sayama fanboy. And eventually we end up seeing this alien Iguro, if I remember the name correctly, who has like 4 eyeballs on his head here.
He's kind of like a Pikmin.
Yeah, kind of. He's sort of like a prince in a different world. And he's a huge Reina Sayama fan, like totally in love with her. He's been killing these people, they eventually find out. Well, then everything comes to a head at a Reina Sayama concert where Data shows up. And he basically ends up like threatening Reina Sayama and fights Ultra 7 and Ultraman. Then Iguro shows up, and then he kills Iguro. And then he comes out and apologizes to Reina Sayama for saying, please don't take my threat seriously. I only had to do that to bring the murderer out into the open. Like, it's this whole twist. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden that Data, along with other aliens, are part of the Star Council organization that made a peace accord odd number of years earlier. And, they're also at the same time trying to investigate Bemular. Bemular shows up at this concert as well. And like, you're starting to get a feeling that Bemular isn't what he appears to be. And then like, there's so much going on here in these 13 episodes. I'm trying to condense it as best as I can. And then eventually Shinjiro meets this young kid, Seiji, mm-hmm. Who finds out that he is Ultraman. And we sort of think he's sort of a villain, but then we eventually find out he is Ultraman Ace. He is sort of a rogue Ultraman whose dad is an alien. And we eventually find out Seiji actually doesn't have any limbs because his mother and he were on that plane that blew up that we see earlier in the series. He somehow survives. Bemular saves him and then gives him as a baby to this alien who ends up already having a child, raises Seiji as well. He's very good in electronics and stuff, so he builds Seiji synthetic arms and what have you, and then eventually an Ultraman ace-looking suit. Mm-hmm. And so Seiji's sort of trying to get in good graces with Shinjiro and the Science Patrol. The Science Patrol denies him membership into the organization, and they sort of follow him a little bit and then give him information. So they give Seiji information as to where these assassins are, who actually were responsible. It wasn't Bemular who was responsible for the plane explosion, but it was these assassins. So they are followed to this mansion. And then what ends up happening is Moroboshi, Shinjiro, and the rest of the Science Patrol are like, look, this kid is going to get himself killed. He can't do it all by himself. Let's kind of help him out. So they get in before Seiji actually does any action. The house blows up, and then a kind of a big fight ensues. Ultraman and Ultra 7 are nearly killed by this assassin named Ace Killer, I believe is what he was called.
Yeah,
I want to say he called himself Ace Killer.
I'm not entirely sure myself.
And this other Ultraman type of villain, Seiji ends up coming out and then ends up getting into a fight with this Ace Killer, is almost seemingly killed by this Ace Killer, and then Shinjiro all of a sudden is able to take the limiter off of his Ultraman suit and magically take this assassin out. And then Bemular comes into the picture, stops a nuclear bomb type of object, which is being shot out of an invisible spaceship 200 some odd miles outside of Earth, and at the same time destroys this invisible spaceship. We have no idea as far as what this ship was. It's never mentioned after this. And then Bemular takes Seiji, says it's not the first time I've brought a human back to life, and disappears. And then Ultraman does this typical superhero thing where he flies off towards the end credits roll for the last time in season 1. There's a hell of a lot of stuff I didn't even touch on, but that's sort of the main driving point. And one thing I forgot to mention is that I believe it was Data who eventually revealed to someone that the Star Council organization is ultimately behind that plane crash, because there were representatives of various planets involved in that Star Council that they wanted dead. We still have absolutely no idea what the overarching story is as far as the reasons why they wanted those people dead. And then the informant, we find out too, ends up knocking out Seiji's surrogate alien dad and carries him off somewhere to be continued. There's a lot. There's an awful lot to cover.
Yeah, as far as season 1, just with 13 episodes alone, and with kind of the main storyline of who's behind this explosion of the plane and all of that, but then you also have quite a bit of other side stories. I mean, it's going to be a TV show, so there's going to be multiple seasons for it. But in my opinion, with just season 1 alone, it seems a little too much, sort of say, because I mean, they probably weren't entirely sure if there was going to be additional seasons, with Netflix and all that stuff. But I can sort of understand if there was going to be more seasons after this. But then again, it just felt a little too much. And according to the manga, which I haven't read for many years, but as far as I can remember, I don't remember there being so much condensed within a certain amount of chapters compared to the first season. It just felt a little too much going on for 13 episodes or for just one season. It could have spread out a little bit more. For me, I would think that they could have introduced Ace in season 2. It felt a little too much to have 3 Ultramen in here. I would say 2 was enough at this point in time. What the heck? I didn't.
Jason's throwing a secret party.
yeah, that's right. And you weren't invited, but
I live like 500 miles away. So,
but it just felt a little too much for just one season story wise. Could have had at max 2 Ultramen in here, and could have just introduced the 3rd Ultraman in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I knew because of I'm not a huge anime watcher, but in my limited exposure, I had a feeling that this was going to go down similar territory of like the anime Godzilla trilogy and even the Gamera Rebirth miniseries, where there was going to be some dense storytelling, probably some switcheroony things going on too, where there will be surprises. So I was aware of that more than likely occurring at some point. Probably, obviously not season 1 per se, but I thought, well, there could be some small twists just to kind of get the rest of the stuff going later. But yeah, I agree. I think it was too dense. I am all for getting as much as you can, but I think at the same time, too, there is such a thing as doing so much to where it's hard to keep track of everything, because we have data involved for like 2 or 3 episodes. There's even a scene where he's with the informant later where, once again, they're still trying to figure out like who's involved behind all this. And then it kind of makes you wonder, well, is Data, even though apparently at that concert at the end of when he killed Igaru, that he was all well and good, he was still looking for another alien, and Data could even be maybe still a villain eventually. I don't know, because again, this is just season 1. But and then, yeah, like you were saying with Ace, while interesting, that was a little too much. I thought the whole Reina Sayama thing and then the whole switcheroo that they did at that concert, like, I honestly didn't see that part coming. Because I was like, I honestly remember how I felt sitting there as I was watching this. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, what? Like I for like a brief moment had a difficult time trying to follow what the reasoning was. I'm like, is he being serious, Data? Like when he's apologizing to Reina and saying, look, I did this guy here that I just killed was a fanatic, he went off kilter, and so I had to kill him, that sort of thing.
Not only that, but then you had 3 humans within that crowd that sort of were the masterminds of all this, and then they kind of got a connection. They got in connection with this Prince Pikmin, and then they had that one sort of assailant that's been actually going around and taking out all these other fans.
You have to watch the series. There's just so much that it is incredibly dense. And I'm not too shocked that it's dense, but I'm a little shocked at just to the degree of how dense it is. I'm really hoping that even though it's now 6 episodes for season 2, that just even within those 6 episodes, the pressure valve will kind of come undone a little bit to where we can kind of get past a few of these things. I'm not saying drop them. I'm saying maybe quickly conclude some of these plot points efficiently and satisfactorily. And it's a lot. It really is. I mean, I still am just trying to figure out, like, again, what that invisible spaceship was, because it blows up. they never say anything else about it. And I'm sure it'll come back in season 2, but the fact that nothing else was mentioned about it was weird. And I'm like, people just even in the Science Patrol, they're continuing on with life as if everything was happily ever after for the most part. Ultraman does the typical superhero fly off, and I'm like, but this giant spaceship was just blowing up. Like,
well, and like I said, that I'm assuming how things went, that they weren't entirely sure if there was going to be additional seasons after that. And also, hence, when it comes to Netflix, like a lot of things tend to don't get renewed for another season, because there's been many shows on Netflix that don't get renewed for a second season or what have you. So they probably assume that it depends on how many views that they get with the show and if there's any interest within that. So they sort of assume, trying to condense a lot of these sub stories within this first season. That could be one of the reasons too behind it. So there can be multiple reasons.
And I'm going to tell you something right now, and I figured this out pretty early. I'm letting you know right now, Bemilar is Yuko. And Yuko is the girl that Seiji talked about quite a bit during the episodes he was in, about this girl who was older than he is and that he really cared for. And the reason why I'm telling you it's Yuko is because I realized very early on when I saw Bemilar, I'm like, those are very wide hips. Those are the hips of a woman. And kind of towards the end there, when Bemilar takes the nearly dying body of Seiji, I'm like, okay, like, it's not only a woman, but it's Yuko, this Yuko girl that he had been talking about since whatever episode number he arrived in. So I'm telling you right now, Bemilar is Yuko.
I never even bothered to look at the hips. So you had a little bit more detail in that.
Well, I looked at it. I'm like, well, sense. You know, because it had this male voice and it said Bemilar. I'm like, anatomically, that's not a male, because of the wide hips.
Yeah. So I didn't really dive too much into that. So I'll keep that in mind moving forward to kind of look more into that sort of thing. But in that regard, do you have any more addition to as far as a story or
gosh, like, again, like, how do you even tackle something like this? Again, it's just dense. It is. I will say this, though. Despite it being overly dense, it is by and large well told. And it definitely leaves you hanging for season 2. But ties it up enough to where you feel partially satisfied, to where, like you said, if they didn't renew it for second season, you're like, okay, well, there's some knots that haven't been tied. I'll just go with it. It's entertaining enough. It's interesting enough. But yeah, it's more dense than it should be.
Mm-hmm. So with that, what do you think of the main characters and as well as the supporting characters? I mean, we get Hayata and Ide from the original Ultraman, but then you also get additions of Dan Moriboshi here, which much younger version of Dan Moriboshi compared to the Ultra 7
and a jerk
TV. Well, we'll get to that. And then I'm assuming this Seiji Hakuto is the Ultraman ace from the other from the Ultraman
I don't
Ace
think so, because Ace, my son watched Ace during COVID and then finished it up like a year and a half later. I didn't watch a lot of it with him, but if I remember correctly, Ace became Ace when a man and woman member from the Science Patrol type of organization that is in that series came together. I don't remember the guy's name, but it was a man and a woman. They had to like do the Ultraman thing together, and they became Ace. Like they worked together as one Ultraman Ultraman. So that's how that one worked.
Yeah, I haven't really watched a whole lot of some of the show Ultraman TV shows in between. Was it Ultra 7 and all the way to Ultra Leo? So I'm kind of haven't watched any of those in between those two episodes. So I mean, one of these times I need to get around to it, but yeah, nonetheless, as far as the main and supporting characters, what do you think of these editions?
They're fine, I guess. Like, these are characters that in some ways are types, and in other ways are being slowly fleshed out to be a little bit more than types. Shinjiro, I would argue, to some respects, is a stereotypical hero that we get in these types of stories, where he's a good-looking young man who may be a little awkward with the girls, who doesn't necessarily understand how special and important he is, and finds his way. It's sort of a smaller version of the hero's journey in some respect. Moroboshi is the stereotypical stick in the mud who is an ally, but doesn't want to be an ally because he finds the new hero to be just repulsive. Seiji is kind of this anti-hero, complicated, I think, eventual hero that will be a part of their team moving forward. I think he'll end up being admitted to the Science Patrol once he gets fully healed by Bemular or Yuko. I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. And they're fine. I find it just weird, though, that Hayata and Ide are more serious than their Showa series counterparts. It just, like, I don't mind people being serious because, look, we're all complicated human beings. We all are at times goofy and stuff, and then serious. And even that original series occasionally portray these two characters as serious on occasion. And I'm not saying Hayata was overly goofy, but he seemed to be a bit more laid back, while Ide was sort of the comedic relief. It's just weird seeing them more serious here.
Especially with Dan Moroboshi in this one, where he was kind of the real a-hole. Like, he's really separated from his original type of character that he was in Ultra 7 TV show. As in, like, within that TV show, he was sort of like Hayata in a way, whereas in this anime, he really deviates from that character type, where he's just kind of that, like you said, sticking him up, but also kind of that annoying a-hole at times, and it's just really throws you for a loop. That's sort of the whole theme with this anime, even though it's a direct sequel, like what you said, that it just really throws you off for a loop with certain things, and a lot of the things that you know from the past Ultraman TV shows, where these characters come from, and they sort of deviate or really deviate from their character types.
Yeah, it's just I mean, like I said, they're fine. I mean, I guess I want to know where Shinjiro's mom, Hayata's wife, is. Nothing's ever mentioned about her. What happened there? Are we ever going to learn? I mean, I'm willing to keep that open because this isn't a complete story yet.
I think in the beginning, I don't know, like, you see a woman in the apartment where Hayata is in the first episode before the 10-year skip. I'm not sure if that was his wife or if that was the sister or maybe one of the coworkers. Who knows? You don't really know who that is, and you don't even see him ever again after the 10-year leap.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, does it really matter? No, not really, because so much other stuff is going on. We don't need any more convoluted stuff to go on here. But they're fine. I guess. Like, that's one of the least complicated things to follow in this 13 episode season so far.
So with that, what do you make of the animation portion, where I think around this time when it was made, around 2019, I think this might have been around the time when the Godzilla anime trilogy was coming out, and this is sort of the early days of when they were starting to do the CGI animation for anime, all that. What do you think of like the character models and the surroundings? What do you think of the CG?
Well, this came out like a couple of years after Monster Planet came out. And this either came out a little bit before, a little bit after Planet Eater. So it was around the time when that trilogy was concluding. I really found the animation to be good. In fact, I think it's a little bit better than what we saw in the Godzilla anime trilogy. I find it interesting, especially when you've seen some of those earlier episodes, some of the backgrounds and even the vehicles are actual photographs or stills of, various neighborhoods in the Tokyo metropolitan area that they use as backdrops or vehicles, and just animated them properly to move. I thought that was kind of fun, but the actual models and everything, I think they're an improvement from the Godzilla anime trilogy. There are times, like in the Reina Sayama concert, where Reina is dancing, where I really believe maybe mocap was used for some sequences, because some of the animation was so fluid in some sequences. I really thought mocap was used. Whether or not it was, I don't know. By and large, I thought it was real good. Some of the fights, especially in the final one or two episodes, were a bit tough to follow. Part of that had more to do with the lighting of those scenes than anything else. But by and large, I thought the animation was pretty darn solid.
For me, I think the animation was pretty good, but I sort of noticed at times it seemed like some of the frame rates of some of these character models seemed to be a little bit inconsistent, where they seem to be a little bit jumpy at times. I sort of noticed that kind of that subtle thing. But then and then there's times where some of the animation is pretty fluid in that regards. So, and I would say on average, like the frame rate of some of these character models seem to be a little bit inconsistent at times. But as far as the fighting sequences in that regard were really good. And then as far as the additions of explosions with some of these shots, they seem to be using a little bit of too much smoke. And it seems like some of the smoke seemed a little too much, or some how they animate them, or if they were some sort of overlay in that regard, seemed to be a little bit out of place at times with the average animation and how it looked, or the aesthetics of the animation. But what else? I can't think of much of anything. Oh, and then there are some character models, like background characters or background humans and the like. Sometimes they were a little bit too robotic. When you see average humans kind of walking by.
The
characters, they seemed a little. They felt a little bit too robotic and a little bit inconsistent with some of the with the main and supporting characters. And then if you compare the human models with the kaiju models that were pretty big, like the one in Shibuya that Shinjudo encountered, it seemed like the skin of that and the animation, or the look of it, seemed, it felt a little bit out of place compared to the human models. It just seemed a bit too detailed in that regard. I'm not sure what kind of a specific word I'm want to put on that, but it just felt, the kaiju just felt a little too out of place as far as the animation and sort of the look to it. But otherwise, I would say that animation on average is all right. There's some little inconsistencies here and there as far as the frame rate of these character models, and some things are don't quite match the aesthetic of the animation.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like this is always going to be a little weird. There were moments where it sort of reminded me of like late 90s, early 2000s Saturday morning cartoons that dabbled in 3D animation at points.
Like Reboot.
No, Reboot was like early mid 90s and more obscure than what's being shown here, but it reminded me of like late 90s, early 2000s on occasion with some of those Saturday morning cartoons. Jason, ask me about the tone.
The tone of it is pretty serious.
Well, I said ask me.
Oh, what do you think of the tone of the anime?
That's a good question. This is one of the issues I'm having with this series. We sort of talked about it briefly with Ide and Hayata being a little bit different from their Showa era counterparts. Typically, I don't mind too much of like a serious tone, but because this is Ultraman, and when I think of Ultraman, I think of a little bit more lighthearted fare. And I understand, look, that the series on occasion got a little brutal with some of its violence, but it wasn't like every episode. I was a little put off by the tone here. Again, I give it an A for effort for trying something new. I just wasn't as much of a fan of how dark and uberly violent this thing got at points.
And with it being a direct sequel of the original Ultraman.
Yeah, and that was a big part. Like if this was an actual reboot or something like that, like a retelling of Ultraman, that would be totally different. But with this being a continuation, I was put off by the uber seriousness and violence that permeates probably this whole series. I'm just going to go out on a limb, and I feel pretty safe in saying it's throughout the whole series. I did not care for a lot of that. I thought it was excessive, unnecessary, and did not match with it being a direct sequel, at least to the original Ultraman. Yes, again, I understand that even the original Ultraman, I think, had a couple of moments where you could argue it was a little violent, but it wasn't as violent as some of the stuff portrayed here. There was not blood spurting all over the place like in some moments here. We don't have like a teenage boy who's 14, 15, however old he is, like his limbs getting cut off and getting like shanked by an assassin. To me, it was too brutal. That's one of the things that's turning me off about this series right now. And I don't know if I'm ever going to fully buy into it. We'll kind of see as we proceed through the series. But as of right now, I'm not sold on the tone of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sort of that way when I first encountered the manga of this series many years ago when it came out. And when reading through it, saying that it's sort of, or getting the feeling that it was a direct sequel to the original Ultraman TV show, I was sort of thinking, and then kind of going more into the manga when reading it at the time. I was sort of like, I was thinking to myself, like, how could this be sort of this direct sequel to the original TV show, and then you time skip 10 or so or many years after the whole the ending of the original TV show, where like you get all this advancement in technology and all that, and then you have monsters being much smaller this time compared to them being giant for most of the time, although you get some of those aliens that are human size. And that
a lot of them were maybe human size to start off with in the original series, but then grew to one size. You're definitely talking in an area that I also have another issue with this particular series so far. Yeah.
And then you get introduction to all the other some of the more noticeable characters from other TV shows like Daimon or Boshi or other kinds of Ultraman, Ultra 7, Ace, and then you get some sort of references of all the other Ultraman, but they don't turn into Ultraman like that Jack guy who lives in that alien zone or town or district, wherever you call it. And then you get Dada, but he's actually, this one's called Adad, backwards for Dada. So it's sort of confusing, even though it's supposed to be a direct sequel. Like some things have changed to where it's sort of confusing, and even the character tones of some said characters, like Ide, a good example, and also Daimon Boshi, where they sort of deviate or really deviate from their character types compared to the original TV shows.
Yeah, and we even get one flashback where we see the original Ultraman fighting a giant kaiju. It was briefly, but we see that at one point. It's brought up numerous times throughout the course of these 13 episodes that the original Ultraman, would fight giant monsters and stuff like that. Reina Sayama, one of her deals is that the original Ultraman didn't do a good enough job of protecting people. When she was younger, because she lost her mother in the hospital when Ultraman, the original Ultraman, was fighting a giant monster. I am not, first of all, the whole Iron Man thing, I think it's kind of cool on one level, but then on another level, it definitely is a complete inspiration of Iron Man. So it's a unique take on Ultraman. But the fact that we don't have any giant kaiju, and this Ultraman is, for whatever reason, unable to grow to giant size, it seems off, because with this being a direct sequel to that original series, at least the giant kaiju should be showing up, bare minimum.
Mm-hmm. The other thing too is the other thing too is that how did the Science Patrol get a hold of this specium technology or specium heat rays and all that stuff that the original Ultraman had? That's the other thing to go about, but that's a whole different other animal.
Well, and again, because we didn't complete the series, that could end up being answered as we go through this. I have a bet it won't, but I'm going to leave my mind open and hope.
I would say 70% chance it won't get answered.
I'm more like 95% sure it won't even get addressed. Yeah, I mean, some of the decisions, again, I give an A for effort. I just think the execution and sort of it's fine to have thought this through, but then when you really think it through, and maybe if they had done some test animation stuff and maybe put it in front of a focus group or something like that, maybe the focus group could have helped them out and say, nah, this isn't exact. I don't know. I don't know anything as far as behind the scenes here.
Well, with the anime being an adaptation to this manga.
Yeah.
You would think that whoever started the manga, let me just see here. It was written by Eiichi Shimizu and then illustrated by Tomohiro Shimoguchi. Like as far as the writer, it's like I would try to do as much research behind the whole Ultraman franchise as much as I can and see what would work, what to add, what not to add in this. And also, if you, with it being a direct sequel to the original Ultraman, try to have some sort of consistency as far as some of the atmosphere and the tone of not only the overallness of this manga or anime, but also the characters. Try to keep them a bit more consistent with their original counterpart.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said here, odd number of minutes ago, I would have been okay if this was just a reboot.
The retelling,
but the fact that it's a sequel to that original Ultraman show, at least, it leaves you an awful lot of questions as far as, well, then, okay.
And a little bit of confusion.
I'm okay with this Ultraman maybe not growing to immense heights because he's wearing a robotic suit, but there still should be giant kaiju coming around at least on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening, oddly enough. And so I was left with, at the end of season 1, with more questions than answers. And I understand that they were hoping, and they eventually did, come out with successful, or should I say successive seasons. I still don't understand what's going on. And again, like I was telling you before we came on, I sort of hesitate to condemn this season because we don't have the full story yet. Because some of this stuff, if not all of it, may end up being answered as we progress here. But I think the elephant in the room being, hey, how come this Ultraman can't grow to enormous size? How come there aren't giant kaiju, which is sort of central to what Ultraman is about? Not even that is brought up.
Even though
I don't understand that.
Even though we technically get kaiju in a few episodes here, but they aren't kaiju size.
No, they're just humanoid aliens, more or less.
Maybe about as high as the Predator or Alien, whichever.
Yeah, it's just, I'm hoping it gets answered, but it's not even really addressed by and large here in the first season.
But like you, chances of things being answered for that, probably not going to happen. I'd give it a 70% chance on that too.
Yeah. We just want to go ahead and
otherwise, is there anything else you want to add, or just want to dive in?
Just dive into final thoughts.
All right. Why don't you give your final thoughts and a grade on season 1?
Oh, great. Well, again, the story is so much more dense and convoluted than it really needs to be. Characters are fine. And the representation of some of the kaiju I think are interesting. Like a Dodd, I think, is a unique design and all that. I'm kind of cool with that. And the Ultraman suits, I think, even though I'm kind of peeved it's a Iron Man ripoff, at the same time, I find it to be unique in that this time, instead of it just being sort of a superhero with, a capsule of sorts to turn himself into a superhero, it's done through machine. this is definitely a unique take on the Ultraman franchise, but I'm still left with a lot of questions. And that's not just because this, we didn't finish the whole series. I'm left with questions such as, why aren't there at least giant kaiju occasionally rampaging, on Tokyo or just Japan in general at various points? Why hasn't that happened yet? How come that just even in general has not even been addressed by some character? How come it's not even addressed as far as why Shinjiro and Moriboshi can't grow to enormous size and fight giant kaiju like the original Ultraman, which again, this series is a direct sequel of. Stuff like that makes not only make me scratch my head, but I'm still left with this has to be addressed. Like, this is central to who Ultraman is. And on the one and on the other hand too, like, I'm sort of on the edge of my seat to try to figure out, okay, who this informant is that takes Seiji's surrogate dad at the end. I always sort of had a weird feeling about him that maybe he was a shady character. Ado, one of the heads of the Science Patrol, was sort of missing for a bit too. I sort of had my suspicions about him early in the series that maybe he could end up ultimately turning on the Science Patrol. That hasn't happened yet, but they set him up for that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what the hell was that giant spaceship? Who was it? Where did it come from? Why isn't there a ton of debris falling onto the Earth? And all that is beyond me.
I would assume it could be part of the Star Cluster Council.
But again, nothing's said after that. There's no debris falling down or anything. You even had the mothership from Independence Day having some of its debris come onto the Earth. And I think that was further away from planet Earth than this thing was. So it's just like, I'm left feeling frustrated because on the one hand, a lot of different garbage stories were being told along the way without an ultimate story thread going on. And I understand some of that was for human character development, but even then I would argue some of it went on longer than it should have. If I were to look at this script for season 1, I would have said you can cut enough of this stuff out to where instead of 13 episodes for this season, it probably should have been no more than 8. And there's a lot of fluff here. I'm sure a lot of it does count and does matter, but I think it drags on longer than it should. And I'm deeply frustrated so far by much of this series because, like I just said, I walk away from season 1 with more questions about this series than I had even starting this series. And I'm not going to condemn this thing yet because I still need to see seasons 2 and 3 to really get a good idea as far as, does any of this pay off? Is any of this answered? But right now I am left with sort of a sour taste in my mouth. Bits and parts of the story I do like. The tone I am not a fan of. I think the uber violence on display here is a turnoff. And if this were a reboot, I probably would be more willing to go with it. But again, because it's a direct sequel to the Showa Ultraman series, which was more lighthearted in its portrayal of violence, to me, it's like whiplash inducing. And so I more than likely will end up changing my grade on this once we get this whole thing said and done in a few weeks. It's fine, but I think out of the Netflix stuff we've watched, this so far is my least favorite, perhaps. Ultraman Rising was problematic in quite a few ways, but at least I could understand it and still kind of understand and get why the things it did. Mm-hmm. Here, I'm not sure. I will probably end up, when everything's said and done, give it a higher rating because I gave Ultraman Rising, a D+, I think I did.
I think so.
I'm giving this You know what? Actually, I'm giving this a C minus. Actually, I think on some level, now that I think about it, it is a little bit better than Ultraman Rising, but it's got a lot of questions. Here's my caveat. I'm going to assume that all these questions and stuff get answered. I'm not saying they will, because I still have yet to see the rest of it. If it does, I will give this season a better grade. If it doesn't, I guarantee you it will be a lower grade than Ultraman Rising, and really then the series as a whole is probably not going to get a good grade. So I'm going to give it a C minus right now. It's very interesting, but there are some decisions that were made that are very questionable and some that I really do not like.
Yeah. As far as season 1 goes, like what we've talked about and what I've talked about, there's a lot of side stories within just this season alone, compared to a lot of the other TV shows. And besides just the main storyline of who's behind this plane explosion and what have you, and in the sort. Granted, with Netflix, with how they kind of run their whole thing, that this could have been one season alone, and there could have been a chance of them not renewing other seasons beyond season 1. Hence, there could have been many reasons why they've crammed a lot of stuff within just one season alone. And it just sort of made a little bit of a muddled mess at times. And with having 3 Ultraman in here, it just felt a little too much at times, and I can go on about that. And as far as the animation, it's all right, but there's some little inconsistencies here and there. And as far as aesthetics, like some things didn't feel like it's part of this series in that regard. And as far as the characters, yeah, they were all right, but at certain aspects, they sort of deviated or really deviated from their original counterparts of the Ultraman franchise. And with it being a direct sequel, yeah, it just sort of throws you into a loop of the aesthetic, the atmosphere between the original Ultraman show and this direct sequel of that original series. It sort of kind of throws you into a loop and sort of makes things a little bit confusing, where like some characters, like I said earlier, like characters are completely different or a little bit different from their original counterparts. And even some of the aliens, like some of their names, somehow they switched. Like Dada is now a Dodd. Yeah, there should have been some consistencies as far as the writing, and probably should have done a little bit more research to try to, if you want to tie things to it being a direct sequel, you should at least tie it as such instead of just being a completely different animal. I mean, yeah, I can see if it was going to be a sort of a retelling or a reboot of the original Ultraman, but with it being a direct sequel to the original Ultraman, it just sort of really throws you into a loop, and it just sort of make things a little bit confusing at times. And also, if Netflix wasn't going to renew more than just one season, yeah, there's going to be some questions left answered in certain aspects of the area, but then also sort of tying certain things up. But yeah, there's going to be some questions lingering if there weren't going to be any more seasons after this season. As far as season 1 for me, I would at least give it a C+ here so far. Sort of kind of in the middle ground in that regard. But we'll see how things go, if there's going to be if some of those questions that are going to be asked, who knows. But yeah, that's all I'm going to give season 1 for right now. Hopefully it gets better from here on out. So we'll see in that. So season 1 so far, I'll give this a C+.
All right. And with that said, thank you so much for joining us. We will discuss off air here shortly whether or not we're going to do the rest of the series in an overall review for next time. Otherwise, we will have 2 more episodes of the Ultraman anime where we discuss seasons 2 and 3 and finish this part off, and then probably go back to Kamen Riders. So with that, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and then again, if you see a subscribe button down below or above, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. Smash the like button, and if you're listening to us on any of the audio podcast platforms, make sure to subscribe to us and give us a rating as well. And so with that, we'll see you guys next time.